The topic of brain fuel is an exciting one, and when you hear the words brain fuel, we think of the immediate ones, water and food, and there's no doubt they have a real good impact on the way the brain functions and how it operates. But believe it or not, there's fuel that the brain creates by itself, and it's extremely powerful. And it allows the brain to do things in certain ways that impact not only in what we think and how, but also how we feel. The three brain fuels I'd like to talk about today are dopamine, oxytocin, and cortisol. The brain has many dopamine pathways, but one of them is charged with motivation. The more dopamine we get in response to a certain situation, is the more we're motivated to keep repeating that behavior. The problem or the issue with this is that sometimes we can create dopamine with a behavior that's actually not that good for the body. It could be drinking coffee, it could be drinking wine, it could be doing certain things that allow us to feel safe and secure. Having dopamine released has very little to do with how good that activity actually is for us, and more to do with how safe and secure we feel as we do it. So most people associate safety and security, or maybe associate a feeling of relaxation with an activity that might involve wine or coffee. The minute we take the coffee, that first beautiful coffee in the morning, and we take the first few sips, very quickly we start to feel calmer, start to feel more relaxed. But we all know it takes caffeine far longer than that to get into the system. So what you're actually experiencing is dopamine. Because when you walked into the coffee shop and you got the smell and you heard the sounds, it triggers the amygdala to recognize the situation. Your brain says, I know where I am, I know what I'm going to get, and I know how I'm going to feel in 45 minutes or an hour. But the brain does what it always does, it fast tracks, and it gives you what it thinks you need right now. Long before the caffeine hits your system, you begin to feel the effects of dopamine. Sometimes we feel the same with a glass of wine. People say, I love having a glass of wine at dinner. It helps me relax. But very often that sense of security, that sense of relaxation has happened long before the wine has hit our systems, holding the glass. The smell, again, triggers the amygdala, which triggers to relax, which is dopamine. The challenge is to reset the things that we associate dopamine with. To create, through visualization and the words we use, create a new dopamine receptors so that it's new activity, getting out, having fun, going for a walk, eating healthy. We tell ourselves and we remind ourselves how good this is. Dopamine is an incredible fuel that's used in motivation. Dopamine, when it's released into the brain, makes us feel calm, makes us feel secure. Make sure that your dopamine is linked to activities that best serve you and best serve your brain. The second one I'd like to talk to is oxytocin. And oxytocin is an incredible drug that is released as young babies through the birthing procedure. Oxytocin is the drug that you experience when you feel loved, when you feel safe, when you feel secure. When a mother hugs a baby for the first time, the baby's system is flooded in oxytocin, but so too is the mother. Any human being who feels loved, who feels respected, who feels valued, either by a hug or a thank you, our system, our brains produces oxytocin. And oxytocin has an incredible impact on the brain. It allows us to be creative. It allows us to think differently. It allows us to be assured, to grow self-confidence. That's why a young baby can learn fine motor skills, language, model behavior, seems to have all the confidence in the world because it's flooded with oxytocin. It feels loved. And yet in our modern society, how many people feel loved by their boss? How many people are in deeply loving relationships? How many people have enough human contact on a daily basis? How many times today have you looked in someone's eyes and said, I love you? The importance of feeling loved and the importance of expressing love is an emotional reality, but it's also a chemical reality. It releases oxytocin. So just like the little baby that has that confidence and that ability to learn fine motor skills, sleep is important, but also feeling loved. being committed to deeply loving emotional relationships flourish system in oxytocin, and when it does, the brain behaves in incredible ways. The last one I want to talk about, the last brain fuel, is cortisol. And cortisol is an incredibly powerful thing, and it's designed to help us deal with an emergency situation. Think a little bit clearer. Focus on what we need to focus on, and somehow we seem to get an energized sense of strength mentally and physically. And that's what cortisol does. It brings on fight or flight, and they say it was developed for the caveman who went out hunting and needed in that moment to be agile, alert and safe. But really the caveman probably went out hunting once every 2 or 3 weeks. The rest of the time he sat in the cave, maybe relaxing. With our modern always on world, on emails and traffic and collecting kids from the creche and answering phones, and we have a constant supply of cortisol being put into our system, and that's never what it was designed for. An abundance of cortisol in our system creates inflammation, and inflammation in any part of the body is what leads to disease. In fact, many of our modern diseases are the consequence of an inflamed system. So cortisol, while it's incredibly useful and powerful in small little amounts, we need to be mindful of the amount that is going through our system at any time. And you'd be amazed, the little thing is that lower cortisol levels, small mindful minutes where we switch from the limbic emotional part of the brain back into the PFC, journaling, colouring, human connection, looking into someone's eyes and saying I love you, hugging. All of these things challenge cortisol. Anything that gets you out of the limbic part of the brain, away from fight or flight, limits the amount of cortisol that's being released in your system. And one of the most simplest methods we have that's accessible to us at any given moment is our breathing. You'd be amazed. By relaxing your body language, by taking slow, deep breaths, we're switching from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. And instantly we're starting to switch off and lower the levels of cortisol in our system. So they're the performance of the brain fuels: dopamine, cortisol and oxytocin. Limit the amount of cortisol and try to increase the amount of dopamine and the amount of oxytocin.